Can we just stop? Can we as a community just pump the brakes on this? I think Adonalsium is X person. We don't know anything about Adonalsium, let alone whether or not he has a spirit web. He created the freaking spirit webs. Sule! Today, Kevin has curated more crazy Cosmere theories for me to react to. This isn't the first time I've done this. If you want to see me react to more theories, then you can find them here. Before we get started, we're on a quest to reach 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and the end of the year is almost here, so please subscribe.
It's time for Zach Reacts.
This comes from you/Captain Grizzly on the Cosmere subreddit. I've called it Identifying Aluminum.
Aluminum theory, Mistborn series spoilers. It has always bugged me that aluminum blocks investiture yet can be burned and is used to store identity in Feruchemy. But I have a theory that makes sense with how it works in both Feruchemy and the Cosmere as a whole. Aluminum isn't actually blocking investiture at all. It's just stripping its identity. Any signals or energy that pass through it as investiture get blanked. And at the end result is just that nothing happens. I think Brandon has said that investiture is basically just programmable energy. So it would make sense that any magic, commands, intent, identity are undone as they pass through it. Let me know if there's a words of Brandon on this or if anyone else has said it before, but I have never heard anything about this. I kind of like this theory. I haven't thought about this before. All investiture, specifically active investiture, it needs a command and it needs intent. Basically to be put into some sort of kinetic form to do something, to perform some sort of action. I don't know how the identity mechanics really work in this situation, but passing through this metal that it's just stripped of all command and maybe just goes right back to the spiritual realm instead of remaining within the physical realm. Shard blades hit aluminum and presumably the blade itself like still hits aluminum as if a sword would be hitting aluminum, but it doesn't cut through it like butter like it does with rocks and other metals. So basically with the blade, you're saying that once it hits the aluminum, what it's doing is it's stripping of it of its investiture capacity. But you would think that if that's the case, and if something got stuck in the metal, it would sort of be acting like silver in that case, right? It would be like using up that investiture or destroying that investiture. Another thing I'm thinking about is something like aluminum linings that block different investiture effects. Even in like say Rhythm of War, where there was the Feruchemist who had trapped Vasher and had an aluminum lined room that the sibling couldn't see through. So not only does it like block investiture, it blocks the vision of invested entities. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with aluminum, and it does seem that there's only one counterpart to aluminum, that being silver, as a random metal that can destroy investiture, that neither of them are actually god metals. So there's something going on here, and I think you might be onto something. I just don't know how it all fits. I hope there are other people who are reading this and are able to provide more insight into this, because I actually really like this theory.
And this is on Reddit from you/1exit7604 in the r/Cosmere subreddit.
Title is Survival Shard Theory, spoilers for Emberdark and all Cosmere. So if you haven't read Emberdark, you may want to skip ahead. I want to preface this by saying I know the Coppermine lists Reason as the survival shard, but I'm assuming this is incorrect. The words of Brandon about a survival shard was about a shard we haven't seen before, which many took to mean the survival shard was the last shard that we had unnamed. But we haven't seen quite a few shards, not in the way that we've seen Honor, Odium, Ruin, Preservation, and so on. My theory is that the survival shard is ambition. First off, I think survival is a pretty simple ambition. I think that's what they're trying to say. Now, this theory is pieced together with another theory of mine, which is that the people of Dromanod, First of the Sun, are originally from Threnody. Those Threnodites do like to travel. Kakuban and his people were chased to Dromanod by an entity which we know to be a splinter of ambition. And the lore mother Frond describes Kakuban as having followed a shooting star to Dromanod. This sounds very similar to me as the people of Canticle following their lodestar. As I'm sure we can all agree, Canticle is probably the least hospitable planet in the Cosmere that we've seen, but I would say that this is followed closely by the islands of Pachi and the Pantheon. I don't know, is that true? I would say that Ashen is pretty inhospitable. Maybe even Braze is pretty inhospitable. How about all of the gas giants? Those are very inhospitable. But I get your point. I'm being facetious. I think when ambition splintered and the evil settled on Threnody, some parts of ambition left the planet. Yes. And with them followed factions of Threnodites, and these stars led each of the factions to different places where survival would be difficult, where Ambition's people would have to learn to adapt and adjust to these new planets and the rules to be able to survive and thrive. TLDR, the survival shard is/was Ambition, and the people of Canticle, Threnody, and Dromonod are related and have settled in places of difficult survival to learn to evolve. I think I kind of get what they're trying to say. They're trying to connect this idea that there was a shard who just wanted to hide and survive to being Ambition, but that being a core part of their intent. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think it's very possible within those early days that one of those shards vessels just wanted to peace out and escape and was scared of everything. I don't necessarily think this hide and survive thing necessarily has to be one of the shard's intents. But if it were to be one of the shard's intents, does Ambition really fit as the shard who would want to hide from everything? Survival is also something that's kind of core to autonomy from what we've seen so far. You name Dromonod as this planet that's all about survival, and that's because autonomy had a presence there, still has a presence there in the form of Pachi. Things get weird with avatars, but you know what I'm saying. Hide and survive, I feel like just does fit reason a whole lot better, because I could see a shard who sees all of the permutations, see what's happening around them, and thinking, the wisest thing for me to do right now is to not be here and to disappear. I don't know if that fits Ambition too well, but I could totally see that maybe the people of Ambition, the Threnodites or the earliest Threnodites who left and followed some sort of beacon to Pachi, that could be the case. I mean, we're still arguing right now about who the earliest Dromonods were, where did they come from? I've heard theories about it being early Rosharans. I've heard theories about it being people from Yolen, but I don't hate it. But I also don't necessarily agree that Ambition was the shard who just wanted to hide and survive, because they didn't do it very well. They famously rather quickly didn't hide nor survive.
On the exact opposite side of things, we have a theory about something that doesn't let anything survive. I've titled it Nightshard ? This comes from you/Mr. Sunshores on the r/Cosmere subreddit.
I think that says Mr. Sunshoes.
Dang it.
Theory on Nightblood after reading Dawnshard. Hi everybody, I have read Elantris, it's pronounced Elantris, Warbreaker, Stormlight through to Dawnshard, White Sand, Mistborn Series 1, and Wax and Wane through Bands of Mourning, so potential spoilers based off of knowledge of these books. I just finished Dawnshard, and I have a theory that Nightblood was created by binding a Dawnshard into an awakened sword. I know the 5 scholars made Nightblood to replicate shard blades from Roshar. My theory is that Nalthis had a Dawnshard with the command Destroy, and it terrified the 5 scholars, so they bound it to an awakened sword using breaths and gave the awakened sword the command to destroy evil, essentially trying to focus the command of the Dawnshard. Could be why Azure's sword seems different. Hers could be simply an awakened sword without the Dawnshard, or perhaps in Warbreaker 2 we'll find out more. I think the 4 Dawnshards will end up being Create, Destroy, Change, and Persist, something along those lines. Create being the opposite force to destroy, and Change being the opposite force to persist. What do people think? So first of all, I do kind of like this Dawnshard theory. It's basically, if you're familiar with computer science, the CRUD operations, create, read, update, and destroy. Those are the only operations that you can perform on data, and so the idea is that the Dawnshards reflect this as the only operations that you can perform on all of existence. We have a different idea of what the Dawnshards may or may not be. The only problem with this theory is I'm pretty sure Brandon has stated that Nightblood is in fact not a Dawnshard. So as fun as that would be, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, correct me in the comments, or I might correct myself in editing. I'm pretty sure that Nightblood is not a Dawnshard. However, could have been created with a Dawnshard. I do think that theory is still plausible. There is something incredibly special about Nightblood, but the question has always been, why was it the command Destroy Evil? Why did it have to be that command? It seems super ambiguous and vague. And so I've heard the idea that one of the Dawnshards had to be used within the creation of Nightblood, and I think there might be some merit to that. But Nightblood itself being bound to a Dawnshard or being a Dawnshard, unfortunately, is not the case. It's a lot of fun though, and Nightblood still gives me nightmares.
The next theory has to do with Adonalsium, and I just already know you're gonna hate it. I've titled it Another Piece, and this comes from u/EasyAfternoon1867.
Tress's Cabin Boy's soul theory. So Tress's Cabin Boy was Hoid. So this is basically a theory about Hoid's soul? All right, let's see. Hi, Gonchos. I come to thee with a baby theory that is connected by the loosest strings based on finishing Tress of the Emerald Sea. To set the stage, I have read all of the books except Wind and Truth, Sunlit Man, and Emberdark. So there's a point in Tress where my goat Hoid, as the narrator exclaims to himself a phrase I've never heard on any planet. And since he has no need to speak locally, here it just stuck out to me as he says, "Oh, shattered shards within." Now, we all know in some way the history of Hoid playing a part in the shattering of Adonalsium, and that he did not take on that power. That he's immortal in a way that is different from the others because he had a Dawnshard. And the goal currently of the 17th shard is to find him because Frost is sick and tired of Hoid meddling with everything, as well as some binding vow that prevents him from direct violence. Kinda. This is the Dawnshard. I think you're missing a core piece here, that Hoid is and was a Dawnshard, which explains a lot of these things that you are saying are strange. Soon after this moment, he comments that some say when you become immortal like the sorceress or myself, your soul is replaced with something. My theory is that perhaps just like any other being, Adonalsium was not just made of these 16 intents, but also had a spirit web. Is it possible that instead of taking up the shard of intent, Hoid took Adonalsium's shattered soul? So the problem here is you haven't read Sunlit Man, which explains a lot of these things that you are grappling with, specifically about the nature of Dawnshards and what Hoid was and is. And then you're also making assumptions at the end about Adonalsium, which are just simply not confirmed. So is it possible that this is the case? I wouldn't even say it's possible. Like, if Hoid was Adonalsium, what does that even mean? What does it even mean if Hoid were to be Adonalsium this whole time? I get the theory of Hoid becoming Adonalsium once everything is ascended. That could be fun. Maybe that's the end of the Cosmere, but Hoid currently being Adonalsium, can we just stop? Can we as a community just pump the brakes on this? I think Adonalsium is X person. Adonalsium has already been splintered into 16 shards. Those are your Adonalsium. All of the shards are a part of Adonalsium. Not only that, but Adonalsium presumably created all things. All things are Adonalsium or of Adonalsium. We don't even have it confirmed that Adonalsium was a being. I mean, it's heavily implied in the different texts, but Brandon raffos that every time you ask him. We don't know anything about Adonalsium, let alone whether or not he has a spirit web. He created the freaking spirit webs. So I don't know what to do with these kinds of theories because it's not that there's a thin thread of evidence. There's none. We don't know anything about Adonalsium other than he was splintered into 16 shards, and now there are 16 bits of Adonalsium plus all of the other stuff that Adonalsium created walking around. And that's presumably all of Adonalsium. We can gin up other ideas about if Adonalsium was a person or had a vessel, and just none of that's confirmed and we don't know. So is it possible? I'm gonna say, sure, it's possible to every single is Adonalsium X person theory, because anything's possible with Adonalsium.
All right, Zach, this next theory is a little more grounded. Earth in the Cosmere. This is a post by u/Rexus Prime on r/Cosmere.
Crackpot theory. Every planet is called Earth. Hear me out. In every culture on our planet Earth is called Earth, soil, or ground. In Scandinavian languages, it's Jordan or Jordan. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce these things. I'm sorry, I'm culturally inept. Which literally translates to Earth. In German, it translates to Earth. In insert country here, it translates to Earth. Well, here's what I'm proposing. Scadrial, Roshar, Nalthis, etc. They're all literally translated to Earth, soil, ground. World hoppers simply use the local name for the planet so they don't have to come up with their own names. Scadrial is just how you say soil in Scadrian. Roshar especially, they're super lazy at naming things. Any alcohol is wine, any bird is a chicken, the continent, the planet, and the system is all called Roshar. Rosharans definitely call it ground in their language. It's probably Alethi since those guys are always messing around and hogging all the attention. So Brandon lied. Earth is in the Cosmere, just not our Earth. I don't know what to do with this, man. Here's a little insight. Brandon has confirmed that he takes the Tolkien approach to language within his books. Basically, the text and the prose are translations of these different peoples. Because obviously, an Alethi is not speaking English. They are speaking Alethi. Even within the worlds, like, we get the translation into English when people are speaking different languages. And the only problem is that, like, on Roshar, when we're being translated, I'm fairly certain we've heard things be called the ground or the soil. Like, they go to Shinovar and they're like, what is this? And it's like, it's soil, it's grass. It's not, this is Roshar, right? Like, that's not what they call it. But they do have the word for Roshar that's translated to us. So maybe, I don't quite know what the point is if this were even the case in the first place. Like, sure, every language has its own word for the same thing, right? But like other planets in our world, Mars is called Mars, right? We don't call every planet Earth. Every planet has its own name. And if there were people living on planet Mars, them calling it Mars wouldn't necessarily translate to Earth, right? Planet would translate to planet, but we're getting way too into the weeds with language theory, and I don't like it. I don't like it.
But this next one, this last one is a fun one, and you'll probably love it or hate it. I've titled it Allum-antic Wayne. And this is a theory by u/educational type 7399, again on r/Cosmere.
My theory about Wayne. This may already be a theory, but I couldn't find anything about it on the interwebs. I'm currently listening to The Bands of Warning. It's entirely possible that this theory is confirmed or busted in a future book. When Alec is describing how storing connection works, I got to thinking about Wayne's ability to understand people. A quick check of the periodic table, I think you mean the Allum-antic table, shows that identity is stored in aluminum. A quick check of the copper mines reminds me that earlier in the series, we're told that people commonly line their hats with aluminum to protect against the emotional allomancy, and Wayne's lucky hat is definitely aligned with aluminum. This leads me to two possible conclusions. One, identity does not require conscious effort to be stored in aluminum, and Wayne is able to draw that identity out. Two, Wayne is able to invest his identity and the identity he imitates into aluminum, saving them for later. Of these possibilities, I think the second is more likely. It would certainly explain why he's so protective of that hat. He's literally not fully himself without it, the same way Sazed's memory is dulled when not wearing his copper. It would also explain why his imitations are so perfect. When he draws them out, they're as fresh as the day he stored them. However, his ability to understand how people think could give credence to my first theory, especially considering how he can shift so quickly from wisdom to ignorance. This could also mean that both of my conclusions are correct. What do you think? Has anyone heard anything from Sanderson of this topic? Is there something to this, or am I just chasing shadows in the mist? I unfortunately think you're just chasing shadows in the mist. What I think about this is that Wayne is just really good at impersonating people, and that's all that there is to it. There's also the fact that Wayne is a twin-born. He can't have access to two or more ferrochemical metals, and he already has ferrochemical gold, allowing him to heal himself. If things were working the way that we know they work, he wouldn't necessarily be able to store identity anyway into the metals. Also, I don't quite know how it would work for him to store other people's identities into the metal unless he were impersonating the person so strongly, believing that he was like actually them, and then in that moment moment he's storing them into the aluminum in his hat. But what about those other times when he's not wearing his lucky hat? He wears a lot of different hats depending on the different costume he needs to play. But are they all aluminum lined? Are they all filled with the specific identities that he needs in those moments? And when and how does he do this? How does he impersonate people that he's never met before? Unless everyone that he's impersonating is somebody that he's met before, which maybe it is, but then why does it actually need to be Farrakami and identity happening there? Why can't Wayne just be really good at impersonating people? So from everything we know, I don't think it's possible for Wayne to have aluminum Farrakami unless the rules are broken for him. And two, it's also possible that Wayne is just really good at impersonating people. I think it's interesting. It would be interesting if we found out like, whoa, what Wayne was doing was completely different, but that doesn't happen in Mistborn Era 2, unfortunately, and I don't think this is gonna be revisited in the future. Wayne's safe. Wayne is what we always thought Wayne was. Wayne is just a goofball who's really good at pretending to be other people. But it's a fun theory. Finish the books. But that was all of those theories. I had a lot of fun reading through these, and I hope you did too. Now I know those theories were all pretty out there, and we have our own collection of out there theories if you go to our channel. We would also really appreciate it if you joined our Patreon. You'll get access to our Discord so you can theorize with us about the rest of the Cosmere. Speaking of which, I want to give a shout out to our true Lightcaller patrons, Mac, Aquila, and Cobweb. You guys are so awesome, and thank you so much for all of the support. Kolo,